Hello everyone, I hope you're well. So today is going to be a pre-recorded lesson. What we're going to do is we're going to run it in real time, which means I'm going to put some timers and various other bits and bobs on my slideshow with some tasks to get you going. Over the course of the last few lessons, we've been looking at hard engineering, soft engineering. We've been looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of each of those different engineering types. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Okay, geography is the study of the real world. So what we need to do now is we need to use some examples of some real places where they've started to put a combination of different engineering strategies in place. But before we get to that point, I've got a do now task for you to get cracking on with. Okay then guys, right, so to reconnect the learning, what I'm going to get you to do is I want you to give me an advantage of a seawall and a disadvantage of a groin, okay? So open yourself up a Google document, get a piece of paper out in front of you, whichever is your preferred method, okay? I'm going to pop this countdown timer on for 2 minutes, and I'd like you to see if you can jot down for me an advantage of a seawall and a disadvantage of a groin. Away you go. Okay, 30 seconds left then, guys. Okay, so just finish off those advantages and those disadvantages. And our time is up. Super stuff. Okay, right, so we were looking at the advantages and disadvantages of groins and seawalls. So just as a little recap and a refresh, you can look at what you wrote down to see how that checks off with these advantages and disadvantages that we looked at before. So I asked you within that do now task to give me an advantage of a seawall. And if we have a look at what we've got up here on the screen, we can see here the advantages are clearly labelled up. Okay, so they're pretty effective as a barrier for stopping the sea. And as you can see in this picture here, this is the one that I probably would have gone for. They're pretty useful for tourists and as a little promenade for people to be able to walk along and enjoy the seaside. Then I asked you for a disadvantage of groins. Okay, now for me, this is the most important one. Okay, by interrupting longshore drift, they starve beaches further down the coast, which often leads to increased erosion elsewhere. Okay, and that's something which I drew you a little diagram of last lesson. Just to reiterate that, I'm going to come out of my slideshow now. I'm actually going to open up in here a brand new blank slide for us, and I'm just going to draw it again just to refresh your memories. Okay, so if this is my coastline, which I'm drawing down here, this is the land and this down here is the sea. And if we've got longshore drift moving in this direction, okay, we've got two towns. So we've got town number 2, which I'm going to mark up there, and we've got town number 1, which I'm going to mark over here. If town number 1 builds lots and lots of groins, that builds up a huge beach for town number 1, which leaves it protected. But what that means is that there's no sediment making its way down to town number 2, which means that it doesn't have a beach therefore it's not protected. Okay, and I think that that's really important, that you appreciate that whatever you do at any point on the coast, it always has an impact further down. Okay, right, superb stuff then, guys. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our objectives and our key questions for today. Now, I mentioned in the intro that we're going to be looking at an example, and the example that we're going to look at is a rather lovely looking place called Lyme Regis. Okay, now we're not going to be able to answer the question, which is our target question during today's lesson. Okay, I'm just circling it here with my pointer. I'm hoping we'll be able to answer that at the end of our lesson next. Okay, and it says, for an area that you've studied, to what extent has coastal management been a success? Now, I'm going to go through that question in a moment. I'm going to go through that bugs process that we would go through in the classroom, just so that we can start to decode what the question is all about and what it's telling us, because that's really going to support us if we can do that when we go into that exam. It's another thing that you need to practice and a skill that you need to make sure that you're well rehearsed at. So there's three key questions which we need to look at. The first one is, where is Lyme Regis? If I'm going to introduce you to a place in the world, we need to know whereabouts it is. I need to know what problems exist at Lyme Regis. Okay, so what is it that the coastline is doing to Lyme Regis, which is being a big problem and being a big issue? And then finally, I want to know how the coastline is being managed. So what is it that they're doing in Lyme Regis to be able to protect this area of coastline? So before we get to that point, if we look at this question, which is going to be your target moving towards your next lesson, I've said here, for an area that you've studied, to what extent has coastal management been a success? I've also put my bugs up here. And remember, if we're bugs in, we start off by boxing our command words. And my command phrase in here is to what extent, okay? Now remember, to what extent means that you need to give two sides to an argument. And I've marked that here on this slide. Then what we need to do is to kind of start decoding the question. Let's underline what's important. Well, coastal management, that's important. So we're talking about hard and soft engineering. And I'd also underline for an area that you've studied, because we need to be able to give an example. And the example that you're going to give to answer this question is going to be Lyme Regis. So basically what we need to do to answer this question is to introduce Lyme Regis, say exactly what they've done to be able to protect the coastline from erosion. And then we need to say whether it's been a success, what are the good points about it and what are the bad points about it. Now, you'll notice that during today's lesson, we're not going to get that far, because we're not looking at the advantages and disadvantages. We're only looking at how the coastline has been managed. So we're building up the tools really that we need to answer this question as we start to move through. Okay. So let's start off with that first key question now. Where is Lyme Regis? So just to put it into context, here is a lovely map of the UK, and you can see that there's a little pin which I've dropped in this image down here to show us exactly where Lyme Regis is located. Okay, I'm just circling it with my pointer. So to put that into perspective, we're in Essex, around about where I've just put my pointer here. Okay, so we're moving down to the southwest coast and we're going down to the coastline of Devon. Okay, so if we look at what we've got on this slide, it says that Lyme Regis is a small coastal town on the south coast of England. It's part of a World Heritage Site known as the Jurassic Coast. And we talked about the Jurassic Coast before, because we looked at some of the different features that we find all along the Jurassic Coast in Dorset. Remember, we looked at Old Harry Rocks, we looked at Durdle Door, okay, we looked at Swanage Bay. So there's loads of things that are down in that area of the coast. It's a spectacular piece of coastline and it's famous for its fossils, hence why it's called the Jurassic Coast. And it's also a massive tourist attraction, okay, Lyme Regis. And during peak summer season there, its population swells from 4,000 in the winter time to 15,000 people in holiday homes and in hotels and in bed and breakfasts over the course of the summer. That's a huge increase. So it must be quite nice in that respect. I'm going to come back to this in a second. Before we do that, let's see if we can check it out on Google Earth. Okay, so here we are on Google Earth, okay, centered on Africa at the moment, and you'll notice that I've put the pictures on. I've put the pictures on for a reason. That's because I actually want us to kind of find out a little bit about what Lyme Regis is like as a place and show you some images of what it looks like. So I'm going to go over here to the search box, okay, and I'm going to type into here Lyme Regis, and there it is. It comes up, Lyme Regis UK. This will allow us to gain a sense of perspective on whereabouts it is in the United Kingdom, but also in the world. So here we are circling Lyme Regis, okay, in all of its coastal glory. I can already see actually some sea defences which are being picked up on this particular sort of circling, but let's have a look at some pictures just to get a feel for what it's like. I'm going to zoom in around this area here, which is the harbour. It's quite a famous harbour in Lyme Regis, and it's called Cobb Harbour. So I'm just going to click on it just so that we can have a little look at some pictures and see kind of what it looks like. So here you can see a nice picture of the harbour. You can see the beaches down there. You can see some sea defences, but we can also see some problems over here as well. Okay, these might be problems for the town of Lyme Regis. Look at how crystal clear that water is. You can see why it is that lots of tourists might flock to this particular area over the course of the summer months. Let's just have a little look at one more around the Cobb Harbour. And again, look at this cliff, okay? I can see straight away that there's probably some evidence of rotational slumping where this sand here is going to get full of sediment and it's going to slide off. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's go a bit more into the town to get a feel for what it's like as a place. Let's have a look at this image. Lovely little church, perhaps maybe sort of quintessentially British, really. Again, we've got more sea defences. Looks like it's got this nice village feel to it, doesn't it? Okay, when we start thinking about it as a place. Beautiful photo there, you can see. Okay, you can see here some wave cut platforms, some lovely coastal features. Really, really lovely. Right, what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to leave Google Earth and we're going to start to kind of get a bit more of a sense of what Lyme Regis is like as a place. Okay, so we've had a little look at it on Google Earth. So let's get a little bit more and let's find out a bit more of a perspective about it. So I'm going to show you a little video. It's a bit cheesy. Okay, it comes from the Lyme Regis Tourist Information Office. But just see if you can jot down some adjectives. What sort of things spring to your mind when you look at Lyme Regis as a place? Okay, I'll leave that playing in the background, but I'll mute those tunes just whilst you're all grabbing your phones to go on Shazam to find out what that is so that you can add it to your Spotify playlist. But I'll leave the images there just to kind of think about the adjectives of what it's like as a place. So for me, these are some of the words that came to my mind. It's quite a small village, it's picturesque, it's quaint, it looks very British, looks quite safe, it looks quite friendly, okay? Now, your perceptions might be very, very different to mine, but I think it's really important that we get an idea of what a place is like if it's something which we're going to study as a case study or study as an example. Right, let's see if we can bring things forward then, okay? Now, this is a task for you to use all of the information that I've just told you about Lyme Regis. It's important that we've got a little bit of an introduction to what Lyme Regis is like. And I can actually use all of these symbols that are on here to be able to explain exactly where Lyme Regis is and to give a little bit of information about it. Some of you might have figured them out already. So if we look at this one here, I've got a compass, which is telling me that it's in the southwest of the United Kingdom. Okay, I know that it's on the seaside, so it's on the coast, which is why I've chosen these waves. And I know not only that it's on the coast, that it's on a World Heritage Site, which is called the Jurassic Coast, which is why I've got this fossil, which I'm just circling with my pointer up on the screen. I also know that during the summer, hence the sunshine, the population swells from 14,000 to 15,000 people. So actually, what I can do is I can use all of these symbols to be able to explain what Lyme Regis is like. So I'm going to pop a 3-minute timer on this time. What I want you to do is to pop a subtitle which says Lyme Regis, and I want you to use the symbols that are on the screen to give some bullet point information to introduce what Lyme Regis is like as a place. 3 minutes, off you go. Okay then, guys, right, your time is up. Super stuff. Right, let's see if we can start to move on then. So in terms of where Lyme Regis is, we've got a little bit of background information, okay? Doesn't help us to answer our target question, but I think it's really important that we get the context on what Lyme Regis is like as a place. So let's start to look at some of the problems. Now, I kind of made some kind of nods towards some of the problems that we might find when we looked at the pictures on Google Earth. And in those Google Earth images, you could see the rotational slumping and you could see those cliff lines collapsing and falling into the sea. So most of the town has been built on unstable cliffs. Okay, you've got clay, you've got sand, and it's all slipping and it's all sliding away. Okay, you've got rotational slumping occurring all the way along this small stretch of coastline. The coastline is eroding more rapidly, as it says there, than any place in Europe due to the high energy waves that come on the south coast. South coast is the surfing part of the UK, and it's that for a reason, and that's because we get these big high energy waves with their much larger fetch coming over the Atlantic. In addition to that, because of the unstable cliffs, a lot of the properties that are there have been either destroyed or damaged, and there has been a considerable amount of erosion on the foreshore. Okay, and the seawall is perhaps no longer fit for purpose because it was often overtopped in the past, which means that the sea came over it. So, in terms of problems, well, I've laid them bare for you here. We've got unstable cliffs, we've got high energy waves and high energy coastline, we've got properties destroyed, we've got erosion happening on the foreshore down on the beach, and we've got a seawall which is overtopped. Right, I've put a little symbol in here with a pencil. That's because I want you to get this information down for your independent notes. So 3 minutes, pop a little subtitle that says what problems exist at Lyme Regis, and see if you can get those bullet points down for me. Away you go. Okay, 50 seconds left then, guys. Okay then, guys, right, your time is up. So just to reiterate then, we've got unstable cliffs, we've got eroding coastline with these high energy waves coming from the sea and coming across the ocean. We've got properties that are being destroyed, we've got erosion on the foreshore, and we've got a seawall which is overtopped. So that gives us a flavour for what the problems are that exist at Lyme Regis. Let's now have a little look at how the coastline is being managed, okay? Now, in order for us to be able to explain that, this map that you can see here is going to be really important because it splits the developments that have happened in Lyme Regis up into 4 different phases. So we've got phase 1, phase 2, okay, we've got phase 3, phase 4. Now, some of these, okay, are part of a long-term coastal engineering project which was completed in 2015. Okay, and it was set up by West Dorset District Council, and it's called the Lyme Regis Environmental Improvement Scheme. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to show you a video clip which comes from a GCSE and Key Stage 3 geography video about the protection of Lyme Regis. Again, it's a little bit of a cheesy video, but there's some really good information that's in there. What I'd like you to do is, whilst you're watching it, can you make a note of as many different engineering types as you can see pop up in this video? Let's have a look. Okay, so this is kind of showing some of those problems that we have with the coastal defences that were there before. Okay, so here's our first strategy. You've got a brand new seawall and rock armour. So those wooden groins have been replaced with massive stone groins, concrete groins. It calls them masonry groins. Right? So we've got some beach nourishment going on as well. steel pipes to prevent from landslides. Okay, I'm going to pause that there for the time being because it gives you a little bit of an overview, really, of some of the things that have been put in place along this area of coastline. So I'm going to introduce you to the phases. So we start off with phase one, okay? And phase one is this area that you can see down here towards the harbour, which is called the Cobb. So you've got a brand new seawall and promenade constructed just to the east of the mouth of the River Lynn. So here's the River Lynn down here. So here we've got this brand new rock armour and these big stone groins that we saw within the video. And then we start to move further down towards this area here. And it says that in the winter of 2003-2004, £1.4 million in emergency project was completed to stabilise the cliffs, okay, to stop them from having landslides, putting pipes through them, putting poles through them to try and improve the drainage and to kind of reprofile the cliffs so that they're less likely to slip. So that's our first phase. Our second phase then goes from 2005 to 2007, okay? And you see here extensive improvements made to the seafront costing 22 million. So none of this is cheap, it's all very expensive. Again, we've got brand new sea walls being built, brand new promenades for people to walk in, and you've got wide sand and shingle beach, which is beginning to develop. And you saw that big beach, okay, which is also great for tourism. It's not just a case of it being good for coastal protection. It encourages tourists to be able to visit the area. And then we've got these huge rock armour that's extending out from the Hob here to kind of lessen the impact of the waves as they start to whip themselves around here. And it means that all of this area then becomes sheltered because this rock armour that you can see here at Beacon Rocks is absorbing the power of the waves and preventing it from getting into this nice, still, calm harbour, which you can see on the other side, okay? So lots of things that are coming in there. And then the beach nourishment as well, which we saw in the video, okay? So you've got sand coming in from France, and they're digging it out from the English Channel and chucking it onto the beach to make those beaches much wider. Then we move on to phase three. Now, phase three was to prevent the landslips to the west. So, you know, we're moving down to this area down here from the Cobb, but unfortunately they shelved those processes. So they decided that it was far better to focus on this area, which we can see up here within phase four. And that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into the decisions that lots of these planners have to make. It's not easy to make these decisions. You've got to weigh up the costs and benefits of doing all of those different strategies. And then finally, we move on to phase four. So phase four, we've got here between 2013 and 2015. This was the final phase where we see a brand new 390 metre seawall, which is extending all the way along here, where you can see my pointer. Okay, and that's designed to stabilise the cliffs and protect 480 homes, okay? And they've done more stabilising work here to kind of put drainage through so that when it rains, the water doesn't soak into the cliff and make it saturated so that it slides off. It drains out into the ocean and into the sea. Okay, now this is where it's going to come over to you, and you're probably going to need to rewind this video in order to be able to go back over each of those different phases, and you're probably going to need to pause it as well. What I'd like you to do is to create yourself a little table with your notes that you've already been making and write phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'd like you to put the details of the plan in there so that you've got those as a piece of revision material, okay? In terms of time, take as long as you need. Remember, this video will always be there. You can stop it, you can pause it, you can rewind it at any time. And actually, if we then refer back to our targets, well, we can answer these 3 key questions. We can't answer our target question yet because we've still got another lesson to go. But we know where Lyme Regis is. We know the problems that exist, and we know the 4 phases within how its coastline is being managed, okay? And that will come through when you complete this table with each of those different phases. So that then, guys, is it for today's lesson. Okay, remember, if you need any support or you need any help, just get in contact with me at any time. You can always drop me an email, and I'll try and give you as much support as we possibly can. Okay, in the meantime, have a great week.